Anyway, thank you for your patience, and thank you to Audrey and to Starborn for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you. It's really a great honor. I appreciate it. I'm going to be talking about exolinguistics, or how to talk to an alien. And it occurred to me in the process of my doing this, actually I had to cut down my presentation by about half, which means a lot of stuff I really want to say I'm not going to get a chance to. I'm going to try and speak very, very quickly and say what I need to. But it occurred to me, given my background, which is as a trained psychic detective, trained spiritual medium, a bunch of other things, that I might actually have something to offer for people who have had contact or abduction experiences, that kind of thing. I've sort of come through everything through the back door, so to speak. I come from a family of non-psychics, non-UFO people, although I had two uncles who had some sightings. That was it. Nobody believes in anything in my family. I began my career in business. I've run several businesses. I have practiced securities litigation in New York for a while. And I won't get into all of that, but anyway, I did sort of a dramatic detour in my midlife and got into learning how to be psychic. And that has taken me to a bunch of different places. I do now lecture at psychic conventions, paranormal conventions. I do paranormal investigations, that kind of thing. It took me a long time because I moved from psychic slowly into paranormal once I got comfortable with the idea of hanging out with ghosts and spirits and making sure that that was okay, because I wasn't sure that that was okay. And I was 100% convinced that there was absolutely no relationship between all of that sort of woo-woo stuff and this other UFO woo-woo stuff, you know, two separate categories of woo-woo. And what I have discovered is that they are intimately related, and I think that what I have here to offer is something that may be useful to a lot of you who have had experiences. I wasn't really going to get into my own personal life because I have a whole lot of other stuff I wanted to communicate to you, but I think it may also be useful for you to know some of my... I put myself in the... I think it may have been Denise who talked about the maybe category of people. Was that you, Denise? Oh, it was you, Michael, sorry. So, yeah, I would have generally put myself in the maybe category, and then yesterday I'm listening to everything. I said, no, I took out my thing about the 11/11 prompt because my 11/11s came on like that in May of 2006, and they're particularly intense the last couple of months. Yeah, I got the owls. I just learned about the chirping. I said, oh, chirping? I had no idea that was part of that. Yeah, I got that. I got, let's see, there's some window pane stuff. There were a bunch of other things. Anyway, so yeah, I think I'm probably in that category. Besides some sightings, which I will talk about in a little bit. So, let me just move on here. All right, real quick background. Again, I am trained as a psychic detective. I work with law enforcement and that kind of thing. I am a spiritual medium. I give readings, talk to the dead, that kind of stuff. Medical intuitive, energy healer, paranormal investigator. My radio show, which Peter talked about, unfortunately was abruptly terminated in December on a day's notice. Not quite sure why.
Click on no.
Come on.
There you go.
Let's see. Okay. Since I'm going to be talking about languages, just so you know something about my background, I speak French, a little German, a little Thai. My husband said, just be sure to tell him you've been talking to aliens for a long time. That's because he's French. I sort of got into the UFO thing because people, abductees actually started to contact me. And I got sent photos of things that are kind of similar to the kinds of photos that you all have been showing. Puncture wounds inside the mouth, the three-fingered bruising, the pajama problems, blood on the pillowcases, and that kind of stuff. People came to me because they were looking for answers in an unconventional source, because as you all probably know, it's extremely difficult to get somebody to give you a realistic answer, or even listen to what the statement of what the problem is. This, for example, is a photo that was sent to me just recently by a friend of a friend who he had a sense there was something out the back kitchen door and didn't see anything at the time, and I don't know how well this shows up, but there was at least one guy there, obviously. So, in terms of what experience I have a few sighting experiences, let me put it that way. I seem to have an ability since to be able to call them in. At least they seem to respond pretty well. But this particular circumstance really is what changed my ability to really understand the relationship between my psychic work and UFOs. This was 3 years ago. I was coming out of a movie theater with my daughter, who was about 17. There was absolutely nobody in the parking lot. We were virtually the only people in the movie, and we stepped outside. It was dark. There was very high cloud cover, but not low cloud cover. We're right next to a fairly major highway, and my daughter said, "Look up," and we saw a huge mass of orange lights. And I don't know how many, I would guess maybe 20, 30. They were not organized in rows, or they were sort of a mishmash. Of course, my immediate thought was, well, that's odd. And the lights were sitting there. They were half a mile away, 500 to 1,000 feet up in the air, and I'm very good with space relationships. And I thought, well, maybe they're shooting lights up from the ground, from the baseball field down there. No clue. Anyway, clearly wasn't that. Eventually, we stared at it long enough you could make out the outline of a huge boomerang-shaped craft. And that was my view down there. That was the little drawing I did. I took a photo above that white building, was where that craft was. At any rate, it didn't occur to me to take a photograph. I was absolutely fascinated. My daughter was screaming, "Let's get out of here." And I said, "No, I want to see what happens." And by the way, this was the size of a football field. I forgot to mention that. So it's boomerang shaped, size of a football field. It's sitting there absolutely stationary. And at one point, over the right-hand wing of this boomerang, an orb telescoped open. It was roughly 15 to 20 feet in diameter. It was an absolutely different quality of light from the orange lights that were on the rest of the craft, which had the beams, they refracted. This light did not refract at all. It was internal, it was luminescent, it was absolutely uniform. It detached from the wing, made sort of a curlicue movement, intelligently guided, obviously, as if it were searching for something, went to the other side of the craft, went underneath the craft, came back, disappeared for a second, came back over the top, reattached itself onto the right-hand part of the wing where it came from. And at one point, and my daughter said, "Oh, look, it's disappearing." And then the craft disappeared. And when I say disappeared, it either shielded or dematerialized in 3 phases. The wings went first, they were gone, the midsection of the wings, and the center of like you turn off a TV set, just poof, gone. This absolutely did not fly away. I lived in Manhattan for 25 years, right near LaGuardia. I know the optical illusions you get from aircraft flying towards you and sideways and all that. That was not this. So my daughter's screaming, she's terrified. We come all the way back home. She says, "Oh no, what do we do? What do we do?" I said, "Okay, first thing, you're going to make a drawing and I'm going to make a drawing before we talk to each other about what we just saw." So we did. My daughter's drawing is up there on the top. We both tried to draw the direction of the orb, and as you can see, we're fairly consistent, both of us, on that. The closest thing I ever saw to anything online, because immediately after that I started researching UFOs. Never did that in my life because I could have cared less about them. The closest thing I ever saw was this football field-sized boomerang-shaped UFO that was seen in 1975, and there's a rendition of it there. What I saw actually seemed larger to me, but who knows? Side point. My daughter then said, "Okay, we have to report it. We have to call the police." She picks up the phone. I said, "Celine, put the phone down. What are you going to tell them?" Okay, fine. Here's what you do. What you're going to do is you're going to call the police department, and you're going to say, "Has anybody seen anything unusual in the sky tonight?" So she did that, and obviously they said no, and that was the end of that. I did end up reporting this about a week later. So at least it's in there because I didn't feel an obligation. I mean, somebody ought to know about it. This thing was for real. Why nobody else saw this and we're next to a highway, even though it was deserted that night, I don't know. What I will say is that of all of the various UFO, ET-related things that have happened to me, there does seem to be an interesting theme, because of course I always look for themes. The themes, and I'll point these out to you, but they're related to time travel. And I don't know what's being said to me. I'm not quite sure why. I do know that through the mediumship work that I do and the psychic work, there's an aspect of time travel, so I'm not uncomfortable with that. The movie that we had just come out of when we saw that craft was Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, which is all about going back in time. I don't know if any of you ever saw it. Another circumstance that I'll tell you about, the movie that had just played was, what was it called? The Benjamin Buttons with Brad Pitt, that movie about him growing younger, I think. Very strange. I also have come back from training doing remote viewing, and for the first time ever, all of the doors on all of my 200-year-old clocks were swung wide open. Never happened before, never happened since. There was absolutely no reason for that to happen. So I do believe there's a time-related message here. At any rate, I want to talk about language and communication. It did occur to me that maybe the best way to give all of you some form of empowerment as contactees or abductees is to give you a way to think about communicating with extraterrestrials or aliens, whatever you want to call them. I had an interesting, let's call it a dream, okay? Now that we're talking about dreams. I found myself, and by the way, I'm a lucid dreamer, which means I can control my dreams. I've been doing that ever since I was a little kid. I'm in my car. I find myself about a quarter of a mile from my house. This wasn't that long ago. And I'm sitting in the driver's seat and waiting to pick up somebody. I don't know, a friend of mine, I don't know who it was. As I'm sitting there, an alien jumps in the car, closes the door, sits down next to me. I don't know anything about reptilians, but this guy was sort of reptilian, I think. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is not good. And I don't want to be abducted. As far as I know, I've never been abducted. I don't want it. So I'm thinking, if I just quickly jump out the door, I'm going to be good. Except we look at each other. He looks at me, I look at him, our eyes lock, and all of a sudden I realize I'm in really big trouble because I feel a lockdown. And I don't know how to explain it. It's like a vibrational brain lock where you're just done. You're in a state of brain, mental connection where I'm now on his wavelength. And I said, oh, I'm in deep shit. This is really, really bad. And then I thought, wait a second. I didn't train to be a psychic for nothing all these decades. I ought to know something. So I said, I'm not going to do this. I gathered what I would probably call the equivalent of a lightning ball or a plasma ball of thought. And I mentally shot it back through his brainwave pathway. This might sound really nuts, okay? But it worked. I broke that lockdown. And I was really, really proud of myself. So, that's possibly something we can all learn how to do. I think it's a cool thing. Anyway, so let me get back to, so now I'm really running out of time here. I gotta talk about, okay, I used to think in the beginning there was light. No, I have now figured out in the beginning there was sound and sound waves, all right? And as in the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and you've got the rest of that. And also here I have a giant picture of the Om symbol, which is used in Eastern cultures and means God. All right, so simple question, can aliens speak without a mouth? You do need certain anatomy in order to speak or communicate language. Anyway, you need a mouth, you need ears, you need vocal cords. It seems to me from looking at a lot of these pictures, and I don't know aliens from anything, most of them, the Greys, insectoids, reptilians, those guys don't They have very small mouths and little to no ears. And I would say the only ones that don't fall into the category would be the humanoids. To me, of course, that just suggests that evolution has made them unnecessary for them. There was a Brazilian man named Jefferson Souza. He was first contacted at the age of 13. He had multiple contacts from the Umites. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, planet Umo or Umo. And he said, quote, "The most significant physical difference between ourselves and the Umites is that during their puberty, both sexes' vocal cords are so severely affected that speech becomes impossible. Adults therefore communicate by telepathy. The group sent to Earth was selected from the few exceptional individuals who remain immune to this impediment." All right, so those are the speakers and the telepathic ones. Other reports say that the tall whites sound like barking dogs. Some say the tiny aliens, probably the Greys, have a sort of Chinese-like language. Going back to my more spiritualist, psychic roots here, I can tell you that in certain seances, the medium will use what's called a seance trumpet. They've been doing this for at least 100, 150 years. This trumpet will, during the seance, it will fly through the air, travel above the heads of people, and you will hear the spirit voice communicating through the trumpet. These are some older pictures, and you have to be very careful with the old ectoplasm pictures. One of them shows the trumpet being connected to an ectoplasmic cord to the medium, and the other is using a direct voice with a bunch of sort of icky-looking ectoplasm on his neck. Spirit voice coming out of his neck. If you don't believe in ectoplasm, that's fine. If you want to take a look on my website, there is a picture of me with a humped nose, very highly defined cheekbones, which I always wanted, and a red mustache, which I never wanted, and hopefully will never get, and clearly a man. That's ectoplasm, that's what it does. Anyway, you can take a look. All right, channeling aliens in sleep. And I gave you one example, sort of through my dream. Now I'll give you one more example. This was an interesting case for me because it was more this direct contact thing. I was taking my daughter out to, she was looking at colleges, so I drove her all the way up to Pittsburgh. I took my son. I drove the entire way. It's about an 8-hour drive, extremely boring. And I do mental gymnastics while I'm driving. I finally get to the foothills of Pittsburgh, and I'm really bored, but it's dark and hilly, and I'm thinking, you know what? If you UFO guys are out there, here's a perfect place. You know, show up, do something. And of course they don't. And so we get to our hotel. I put the 2 kids in the other bed because they move and kick and move around a lot. I'm in my bed, and I'm out like a light. And they watch Benjamin, the Fabulous Life of Benjamin Buttons, whatever it is. Anyway, middle of the night, and let me preface this. My daughter is a sleep talker, teeth grinder. She occasionally sleepwalks, but she doesn't make any sense when she talks. So sort of like that. And she started to talk in the middle of the night, and I'm pissed because I am exhausted. So, and I'm gonna go over and push her, and then I think, nah, I'm a mother. I really ought to find out if there's anything at all important that I should know. So, and then she sits bolt upright, opens her eyes, and she says, "Forget about the grace. I don't know what you humans mean by grace anyway." Boom, falls back to sleep, eyes closed. Now my eyes are, I jump out of bed, I get a notepad, I write down the exact words that she said. Now, what she didn't know, and what I never ever told my kids, because I didn't get them involved in any of my psychic or paranormal work at all, because they're kids and there are reasons for that, was that the previous day I had spent the entire day back and forth talking to one of the most well-known demonologists in this country, because I wanted to know what's the meaning of a charism, because I'd interviewed the top exorcist over at the Vatican, and he said, well, we do work with charismatics, because they work with charisms. All right, so what's a charism? So this demonologist, he says, you know, it's too complicated. I'm going to have to send you Vatican literature. You look at it. Spent the whole day researching a charism. Well, charism, as it turns out, means a grace. What is a grace? It's speaking in tongues, prophesizing, healing, any of those things, but within the context of the religion. So remember, what she had said when she sat up was, forget about the grace. I don't know what you humans mean by grace anyway. So next morning, she gets up and I say, Celine, what does the word grace mean to you? Oh, it means like what you say at Thanksgiving. It's like what ballerinas do. Okay, great. So she doesn't know what I know about grace. I said, Celine, did you have any unusual dreams last night? Oh, yeah, I had a really cool dream. Yeah, what was it? I got taken up in a spaceship, and they took me out of this galaxy, and it was really nice there. And then they said, you gotta come back, and I didn't want to. I said, really? What the spaceship look like? And she describes it for me, and I said, oh, that's very interesting. I also dreamt about that spaceship, except I wasn't on it. So the question is, was that a communication? And when you're dealing in this it's like that space of hypnagogic sleep, only it's in a space in reality. And because of the work I do now, I work a lot in that space. You have to begin giving credence to events. They don't rise to the same level as facts, but they become something that you need to take into account within reality. John Keel was a great ufology, you probably are all familiar with him and his work. He talked a lot about how when he really got into this, he began to hear electronic voices, strange ones on the phone, which he attributed to ETs. I do hear these, and my daughter hears these. We primarily hear them on the phones with each other. The voices, if you can call them voices, they're really not. They're something absolutely bizarre. It's not your typical telecommunications screw-up stuff that you hear on the phones. It's different. It will interrupt a conversation. Both parties can hear the electronic voice, but they cannot hear each other. And then what it does is it automatically hangs up the connection. And then it takes a long time before both people can get back to each other again. We've had this happen several times. We talk about the windshield stories. Well, yeah, I got a windshield story. A friend of mine, I was giving her a reading. She's a very famous psychotherapist. And I finished my reading, and I only knew one thing about her, and that is that she had told a story once about seeing a shaman's face appear in her windshield. She had to pull over, and years later she said she finally met this shaman in South America, who said, where have you been all this time? I'm waiting for you. But there was something in me. It was one of those, gotta blurt it out moments. And I was gonna say to her, is it possible that face that suddenly showed up in your windshield could have been an alien? Now, why I was gonna say this, I don't know. It made no sense to me. And the words are coming out of my mouth, and the phone goes crazy with these electronic noises, but they're things, they sound like chimes, they sound like you're inside of, something prehistoric. I mean, it's crazy. It's not typical electronic. She finally, and of course it disconnected us, she called me back, and I said, that is what I'm talking about. And she said, what the hell was that? She said, whatever that was, it was not of this earth. And it clearly wasn't. So this is another way, which I absolutely believe, they do communicate through your machinery. Oh, and by the way, my computers are screwing with my time zones. I can follow email threads, and what I'm sending out, the time will be, 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I mean, it's all over the place. There's no reason for that. All right, back to languages. So what languages do aliens speak? All right, and in order to understand, you got communication. Language is only a subset. You've got verbal, you've got written, you've got symbols, which are mathematics, images, glyphs, and you also have movements, body language, dance, ritual, sign language, that kind of thing. This is a woman named Greta Woodrow. Funny story was that when I didn't believe in anything, back when I was at Princeton, two friends of mine who were classmates, their mother was her. And they said, let's see if we can bring her to come and speak. So we did. She was the first person I ever saw bend a spoon. I've now seen many people. In fact, now I can bend spoons, which is great. Oh, which reminds me, another electronic story. I'm also friendly with somebody named Uri Geller, who's the spoon bender. Okay. I interviewed him a while back. I had to do a pre-tape interview. I must have tried that interview 5 times because every time I would get on the phone with him, nobody else, there would be a static overlay over only my voice. And when I suggested this might be something possibly abnormal because I had the equipment, I had electronics experts all over the world looking at this stuff. Nothing wrong. Anyway, I do think that was another form of communication for probably a purpose. And anyway, we brought her to come and speak at Princeton. Turns out that she was one of the most famous alien channelers of her time. She's since passed away. But according to her kids, my friends, she would speak in languages. For example, if she was in Paharic's Faraday cage, she would speak in different languages that she didn't know. She spoke Icelandic or Spanish or anything. So they can, I believe, communicate through any means they want to. If there is a form of a universal language, I would say it would be equivalent to a white light that you would then put through a prism, and when it refracts through, it comes through all the different rainbows, which I would equate to different languages. Each one gives a rough approximation of the original communication, or a piece of it, but not 100%. Same idea as you bring an idea through consciousness and it gets manifested through language. Story of the Tower of Babel, in the Bible. In Genesis, there was, in that story, it was one people, they go to one region, they all speak one language, they're having a good old time. They say, let's build a tower, we're gonna build a tower to heaven, woohoo! And they're doing great, except God says, nah, I'm not sure I like this idea, because with one language, you can do anything. And I think that's the important point. And after that, the tower never got built, and here we are. All right, so do aliens have a written language? And I really hope you guys can see it. If you can't, please move forward, because a lot of what I am showing is sort of visual, so it's important to see it. There was a clinical psychologist named Dr. Mario Pazzaglini. All right, he did a lot of work in this field, very interesting. The things to remember, he said there were 3 from all the alien samples that he got from people, 3 main alien writing styles: geometric, cursive, dot and line. 4 types of alphabets that they're generally using. They have, where they represent letters, they're syllabic, ideographic, or symbols. And he said there are 3 main ways that people generally receive alien writing. They get objects that have the writing, they see objects, and they were either remembered or they get inspired by it later, or as a telepathic channel, and I'm going to talk about each one of those. These are examples of the 3 different writing styles: geometric, script, and dot and line. All right, first example, when you find an object with alien writing on it. First good example, I'd say the 10 Commandments. Moses shows up with some stones with writing. Problem is that we don't have the script anymore on the tablets of the 10 Commandments. However, the founder of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith, he was a young kid, he was living in upstate New York, he was actually a psychic treasure hunter, and he was told by the angel Moroni, go to this hill, he finds the gold, they're described differently, plates or books with very strange writing on them. He takes it upon himself to translate them. The way he translates them, he puts a hat on, he puts 2 seer stones inside the hat, puts the hat over his eyes, and translates. This below is actually a copy, I don't even know how many Mormons have seen this, of his translated writing. All right, alien artifacts seen elsewhere, reproduced later. Probably the most famous, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., we talked about. he said, well, you can see what he's reproduced up here on the top. This is what he saw on the famous eye bar that was his father brought home from the Roswell crash debris. And he said that the writing resembled hieroglyphics, but not exactly. But to me, as you can see, I mean, I work free associatively. To me, they look like a bunch of chess pieces. Whatever that means, you know? But if you work free associatively, that's how ultimately you find meaning. This was Antonio Boas, 1957, a Brazilian farmer. He claims he got abducted by aliens. He was brought aboard a craft. He was forced to make love with some humanoid with red hair, kind of creepy. And he read and memorized this inscription above the door of the UFO. Now, as you can see from that, that would be clearly the dot and line style. All right? It's a case in 1975, two 7-year-old Japanese kids living in Kofu. They see a craft, it lands in front of them. It's got some characters embossed on it. A 4-foot-tall being comes out, and they say he sounds like a tape recorder being played backwards when he talks. But that's, you can see there what they remember of the writing. It looks faintly Japanese, but it's not. So in some respects, I think we need to pay attention to how influenced are we by our own concepts of our own native languages, written languages as well as spoken. All right, third category of receiving messages. This is the telepathic or channeled messages. Just want to compare it really quickly to, in my psychic world, a lot of mediums do automatic writing. This was done by a spiritualist medium, Madge Gill. And you can see it almost has that sort of script style of an alphabet, which she claimed was being channeled, I believe, by angels. 15th century alchemist Paracelsus. This guy's kind of cool. He is actually known as the modern father of toxicology. He was a physician, astrologer, botanist, alchemist, occultist, and he worked with a so-called magic language. At that time, there were a bunch of magic languages floating around. That was his magic language. What he would do, and generally the magic languages, they said, were received by, higher spirits. It had to usually be within the church. He would put this on his talismans to heal his patients and that kind of thing. Yeah, I have another cool story about him, but I don't have time. The next guy you probably heard of, John Dee, he was a royal astrologer in the 16th century to Queen Elizabeth I. Allegedly, he stopped the Spanish Armada from making it through in their invasion of England. He created this, it's called the Angelic or Enochian alphabet, quite famous. The way that he said he received it was from the angels. I think he put it through some type of a scrying mechanism or a crystal or something, and he traced the outline of very, very faint yellow letters, and that's how he said he got that. I think the question, the problem is, how do you know what you're getting is good or bad? Okay, good or bad. And I'll tell you a real quick story also. I found somebody online, abductee, kind of an odd woman. She was very, very androgynous. Hung her head like she couldn't look at anybody, was taken in, I think, by some UFO people who wanted to help promote her, and that kind of thing. She came from a background of, I think, drugs and rape, incest, abuse, you name it, bad. I thought, well, maybe she'd be an interesting person for me to interview. So I checked her out, I looked her out online, and she had some writing samples, actually, very strange. The entire page was filled, no margins, and it was like automatic writing. She went. I sent this to a friend of mine who's very psychic, and I said, what do you make of this? She said, I don't know. She sends it on to a linguist, I think professor of language that she knew. That professor then, in turn, sent it around to about, I think it was, many of the top linguistic experts in the world, including the scholars who were studying and deciphering the Dead Sea Scrolls. This whole thing came back like an accordion, boom, 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 boom. She got back to me, she said, whatever you do, take this off your computer now. whoa, she never talked to me like that. She said, I've taken it off of mine. The word that I got back from the highest levels was, this is satanic. I said, oh, okay. Now, I'm not a big believer in satanic stuff, and the less energy you give it, the less power it has. So, but I just take it off my computer. And she mentioned to me later, she said, do you realize at the time that we were doing this, you kept telling me about these, I had an invasion of huge, and I mean huge, black flies all around my desk and my computer. Couldn't get rid of them, never had them before, never had them since. I don't know. All right, anyway, so for good or for evil, so this John Dee's alphabet was actually then modified and used by several secret societies, including Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and Knights Templar. What they do is they manipulate the direction of the letters, and they create a sort of quasi-three-dimensional use of an alphabet. They create seals and keys and work with power locks that way. There is language that has been reproduced allegedly from Mars. This was Swiss medium Helene Smith. She channeled Martian writing. She claimed to have been on Mars, was able to describe the plant life, the animal life. She was quite famous, actually. What looks like a little lightning bolt of that. I haven't seen that anywhere else. Okay, so famous abductee, George Adamski, he created the one with the white background. And then years later, a French-Algerian scientist discovered on the painted rock in Brazil, which had been painted by indigenous people about 2,000 years ago, virtually the identical thing. And assuming there's no hoax here involved, that's quite fascinating. And that's obviously, that's a more of a script style usage of language from Venus. All right, this is a woman, British woman. She channeled just one day, she got a download, and she created 20 paintings that all have that sort of crop circle mechanical look to them, and this dot and line style writing. This is another guy, abductee named Ben. He's been writing these glyphs. He's very confused by them. He doesn't know what they mean. He actually was crazy if anyone else had created anything similar. This is a very dear friend of mine. He's a master martial artist. He's also a healer. And he hadn't done this. He's been abducted many times. He finally, obviously like a lot of people, didn't share this with too many people. And after I had spoken with him, he got another download, which is the one on the right-hand side. I have some theories about this, but he receives them in holographic form. I want to show you just a quick comparison of the dot and line styles from 3 different places. Also, for the sake of comparison, the one in red on the bottom is just human shorthand. It's got that squiggly sort of cursive look, looks a little alien. We don't use it much anymore. The one on the top left was done by a 5-year-old child who said, they just gave it to me, it came into my head. The other sample on the right hand, that contactee said, I received this in my mind after my first contact. It's both technical and religious, how to manipulate minerals and light. So clearly this guy had a grip on the meaning of what he was writing. And getting to the meaning is really the next phase of doing this. This is an abductee, David from Texas, who also apparently been abducted many, many times. He does this writing, has spoken in a weird language since he was very young, since 3rd grade. He says, this writing is very special to me. I use it mostly for sacred purposes. I cannot remember a time when I did not know this language. I write it very fast, but it takes me forever to translate it into English, mostly because it does not lend itself to translation in English very easily. The words are larger. And when I say larger, they are more multidimensional, they're more holographic, they contain more essence than what can be compacted into a little itty-bitty word. Does it resemble human writing? Well, here's some ancient Sumerian. That looks kind of alien. That's our oldest written language. Just for purposes of comparison, I put up, I don't know, you probably can't see these, Arabic, Chinese, Phoenician, Native American, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Ugaritic, and Russian. And also to go back to the comparison of the 3 styles, just to show you, it exists already. In our human languages, we do have geometrics, we got script, and we have dot and point. So it wouldn't be a far stretch to move that into the alien styles. I'm there. Okay, so my conclusions here. There's no consistent written language that emerges from all of these except for John Dee's, okay, which was very systematic and has been reused many, many times. There is no clear meaning that arises, and in fact, it often requires interpretation and translation by the author using psychic skills. That's why going back to the psychic abilities is really key in our world, I do believe it. So we're either dealing with human imagination, which, that just doesn't make any sense to me logically, or different alien languages, possible, or we're dealing with a single alien language that is not systematic or uniform in its written conventions. So what language is best to communicate with them? And I'm out of time.